Have you ever noticed how some people speak, and everything just sounds clear? Not complicated, not impressive for the sake of it, just precise. They understand faster, they explain better, they make decisions with confidence, and you sit there thinking, why didn't I learn how to think like that? Here's the uncomfortable truth. School didn't teach you how to think independently. It trained you to accept information without questioning it. You were rewarded for memorizing answers, not for challenging them, for repeating knowledge, not for truly understanding it. So you learned to remember, but not to think for yourself. And in today's world, that's the difference between drifting and actually understanding what you're doing. In this video, I'll show you 8 habits rooted in ancient Stoic and Greek philosophy, translated into the modern world. Not abstract ideas, but practical mental skills that were never taught in school and are now more valuable than ever. You'll learn how to focus deeply instead of constantly switching, how to actually understand what you learn instead of just consuming it, and how to build independent thinking in a world full of noise. These are not nice-to-have skills. They are survival skills for the modern mind. And once you see them, you won't be able to unsee what's been missing. Chapter 1. The skill school never taught. Focus. You were trained to switch subjects every hour. Math, history, science, always moving, never going deep. So now, as an adult, you do the same thing. A little business, a little psychology, a little self-improvement. It feels productive, but it creates shallow thinking. Seneca warned about this. To be everywhere is to be nowhere. Depth, not variety, creates real understanding. Pick one skill that actually matters in your life. Stay with it longer than feels comfortable, because the ability to focus deeply is a skill school never built, but life demands. Chapter 2. The skill of active thinking. In school, success meant listen, memorize, repeat. But real intelligence doesn't work like that. The ancient philosophers questioned everything. They wrote, they debated, they applied. Passive learning trains memory. Active learning trains thinking. After learning something, force interaction. Write it in your own words. Explain it simply. Use it immediately. Because understanding begins when consumption ends. Chapter 3. The lost advantage. Reading. School made reading feel like a task, something forced, something to get through. So most people stopped. But here's what they missed. Reading is one of the few ways to train deep thinking. A book is not information, it's structured thought. And engaging with it strengthens your ability to think clearly. Read 10 to 15 pages a day. Not quickly, but with attention. Because in a world of speed, depth becomes an advantage. Chapter 4. The skill of protecting attention. No one graded your ability to focus. No one taught you how fragile attention really is. But today, this might be the most important skill of all, because your attention shapes your reality. The Stoics understood this differently. They trained awareness of their own mind. If you don't choose your focus, something else will. Create moments of uninterrupted thinking. Reduce constant stimulation, because clarity requires space, and school never taught you how to create it. Chapter 5. Learning from reality. In school, information came from authority. Books, teachers, systems. But real life doesn't work like that. The ancient thinkers studied people who lived their philosophy, not just talked about it. Results matter more than opinions. Learn from people who have built something real. Study their decisions, not just their words. Because one of the most critical skills today is knowing who to learn from. Chapter 6. Learning through hands and mentors. There's another skill school almost completely ignored. Learning through doing. and learning from those who have already done it. In school, knowledge was abstract, formulas, theories, concepts, but rarely real application, real consequence, real feedback. The ancient world approached this differently. Young men didn't just study ideas. They worked alongside craftsmen, thinkers, and experienced mentors. They learned by watching, by doing, by failing under guidance. Practical skill and embodied knowledge create a different level of understanding. One you cannot get from theory alone. Build something with your hands, fix something, create something, work on something real. And whenever possible, learn directly from someone who has mastered it. Because a single hour with someone experienced can replace weeks of abstract learning. This is the kind of knowledge that stays because you've lived it. Chapter 7. Writing as a Thinking Tool. You wrote to pass exams, not to understand. So you never developed this skill. But writing is thinking, made visible. Ancient Stoics didn't write for an audience. They wrote to clarify their own mind. Unclear writing reveals unclear thinking. Write daily, even briefly. What you learned, what you believe, what you question. Because this is how you train clarity. A skill school rarely develops deeply. Chapter 8. The skill of being alone with your thoughts. School filled every moment. Tasks, noise, structure. But it never taught you how to sit in silence and think. Yet this is where insight happens. Independent thinking requires space. Without it, you only repeat what you've heard. Take time without input. Walk, sit, reflect. Ask yourself, what do I actually think about this? Because the ability to think for yourself is one of the rarest skills today. Chapter 9. The Missing Link. Application. This is where everything breaks. You learned. You understood. But nothing changed. Because school rewarded knowledge, not transformation. The Stoics lived differently. They measured truth by action. Knowledge without application is incomplete. Apply immediately, same day, even in small ways. Because action is what turns understanding into identity. Chapter 10. The Realization. Now you see it. It's not that you lacked intelligence. You were simply never trained in the right skills. Focus, clarity, independent thinking, application. And without them, more information only creates more confusion. But with them, everything changes. Chapter 11. The Modern Stoic Code. The ancient idea is simple. Control your mind, direct your attention, act on what matters. Translated to today, learn less, but deeper. Think more, but independently. Apply more, but consistently. You don't need to become someone else. You need to train the skills you were never taught. At the beginning, you asked, why didn't I learn this? Now you have the answer. Because school trained you to remember. But life requires you to think. The ones who move forward today are not the ones who know the most, but the ones who can focus, reflect, and act. So here's your next step. Choose one skill from this video. Practice it daily. And slowly, you'll notice something shift, not just in what you know, but in how you see the world.